Hello, I'm really glad to be here with you today. As you know, the topic is direct and indirect speech. What is that? We use reported speech when we want to repeat what someone previously said. For example, you have three people. They are Jose, Mario, and Miguel, and then they are talking to one another. At a point, Jose may say something, Mario can hear that, but Miguel didn't hear that, okay? So what Mario has to do is to report to Miguel what Jose previously said. Now, there are two ways to report what someone else has said, and we call it direct speech and indirect speech. What are they? Ways to report what someone else has said. In the direct speech, you have something like this. Miguel said, I am tired. In direct speech, you say, Miguel said that he was tired. Okay, there are several things here to pay attention to. So let us begin with our lesson. Okay, let us begin with direct speech using statements. In other words, a sentence is in the affirmative form. Okay, direct speech. Look at the subject. He said, okay? You use say when you want to report. This is a reporting verb. He said, the food is delicious. Here, what you have to take into account is that you are using the exact words of the speaker. That is why you have a quotation at the beginning and a quotation at the end. When you see the quotations, it means that those are the exact words. There are two more things. After the verb say, here it is in the past tense, you use a comma. He said, comma, you make a pause, the food is delicious, okay? As I already mentioned, quotation, and then you have a period at the end. Something particular about this period is that it is before the final quotation, okay? Just after delicious, period, and then the final or the closing quotation. He said, the bill includes a service. You see, said, comma, then quotation, the bill includes a service, period, and then the final quotation. He said, the service was low. Okay, one more thing for you to remember. When you are quoting, when you are using direct speech, when you are using the exact words, you keep the tense. Here you have present tense, so the speaker used the present tense, here the present tense, and here the past. You may have future, present perfect, or whatever. You use the exact tense, okay? You don't change it because you're using the exact words. Now, let us continue with the other slide. We continue with statements, but here we have indirect speech. We have the subject, he. You have the reporting verb, said or told, here in the past tense. And then you may have here a noun, for example, Miriam, or you can use a pronoun, her. And then you have the introduction of the indirect speech, and here you have the rest of the sentence, okay? Let us see the first one. He said. After say or said here in the past tense, you don't use a noun or pronoun. Why not? Because say is not a transitive verb. Okay, here you have a transitive verb, so the action can fall on somebody or on something. He told Miriam, okay? But you cannot say, he said Miriam. That is a mistake. That is a grammar mistake. After say or said here in the past tense, you cannot have an object of the verb, okay? So you cannot have here a noun or pronoun. After say, you have the indirect speech following. Okay, now let us say it again. He said that the food was delicious. Past tense, past tense. Okay, here you change the verb. If the original quotation was in present, you change it to past. Okay, let us see the other one. He said that the bill included service. Past tense, past tense. But if you remember, the last sentence was in the past tense. The service was low. Remember in the previous slide? Okay, if it was in the past, what tense do you use here? You use the past perfect. And then you say, he said that the service had been low. If you say, he said that the service was low, and you're using indirect speech, that would be a mistake. Okay? A grammar mistake. When you have past in the original sentence, you change it to past perfect. Okay, that is something that you have to remember. Now, let us use the transitive verb told. What is one characteristic of a transitive verb? It takes objects, okay? He told Miriam. He told her. What? That the food was delicious, that the bill included service, that the service had been low. Okay? Remember, past, past, present, past, and past perfect. Okay? The original sentence here was the food is delicious. You change it to the past. The food was delicious. The original sentence here was the bill includes service. So you change it to the past tense, and then you say the bill included service. And here you had past tense. The service was low. You change it to the past perfect, and then you say, he told Miriam that the service had been low. Okay? We were studying statements. Now we have yes, no questions with direct speech. So the direct question was, have you finished the report? The direct question was, do you think we're going to have time to finish? Now, let us see the whole sentence. The boss asked, have you finished the report? Remember that here we have the exact words. How do we know? Quotation at the beginning, quotation at the end. And after asked, what do you have here? Yes, you have a comma. The boss asked, pause, comma, have you finished the report? Or in the other example, you have the boss asked, do you think we're going to have time to finish? Okay. How do I know it is direct speech? How do I know these are the exact words that the boss said? Because you have a quotation and you have a quotation at the end. Okay. And after the reporting verb, you have a comma. Now, what happens when you have a yes-no question with indirect speech? Okay? Let us see the examples that we have here. Subject, the boss. Reporting verb, asked. Here we have the object of the verb, asked who? Martha. Asked who? Her. Okay, you may have here a noun or pronoun, and then here you have the indirect question. Okay, the boss asked Martha if she had finished her report. Okay, we have if beginning the indirect question, or we can have whether or not. Let us see the second example. The boss asked her whether she thought that they were going to have time to finish. What you have to pay attention to here is the use of if or whether. When do we use if or whether? Remember, when we are talking about yes, no questions, okay? And you have to pay attention to the tense of the verb. Remember the question that we had? Let us remember. Have you finished the report? What tense is it? This is the present. Perfect. Have you finished? Have finished. So you change, when you have indirect speech, you change from present perfect to past perfect. And that is something that you have to memorize. You have to internalize. Okay, so remember always to pay attention to how the tenses of verbs change. Now, but we have something else, and it is this. We have WH questions. We have studied statements, and in the previous slide, remember, we had yes-no questions, and now we have WH questions. What is a WH questions? It is a word like this: what, who, when, where. The beginning of them is WH. Okay, so we're studying now WH questions with direct speech. What do I mean by direct speech? You have the exact words of the speaker. Look at this: the subject, the customer, the reporting verb, asked. The direct question: what time does the manager arrive? And in the other one, who is the manager? Okay? Remember, after the reporting verb, you have a comma, and then you have the quotation, you have the direct question, and then you have a period, or here you have a question mark, and then the final quotation. What do quotations tell you? They tell you that those are the exact words of the speaker. Okay? Now, let us see the first example that we have here. The customer asked, what time does the manager arrive? The customer asked, who is the manager? Okay? Here, we don't change anything. Why? Because we're using direct speech. We just have to remember the comma, the quotation, and the final punctuation mark, whether it is a period, a question mark, an exclamation mark, or whatever. Okay? Now, let us see the other slide. And here we have to be very careful with WH questions when we are dealing with indirect speech. Subject, the customer, reporting verb, asked. Here you see no comma. Okay, why no comma? Because we are dealing with indirect speech. The customer asked the waitress. You have a noun. Or the customer asked her. You can also have a pronoun. And then we have the indirect question. Okay, what is the beginning of the indirect question? The WH word. Okay, what? Or here we have WH. So when we are dealing with WH questions in indirect speech, you begin the indirect question with the WH word. Okay? Now, let us see the whole sentence. The customer asked the waitress what time the manager arrived. Okay? Remember that this is not a question. That is why you don't have a question mark at the end. You are reporting the previous question. Let us say it again. The customer asked the waitress what time the manager arrived. We would make a mistake if we asked a question here at the end and it is indirect speech. The mistake would be the customer asked the waitress, what time did the manager arrive? Okay, that would be a mistake. No, in indirect speech, you don't have a question at the end. You have here the order of an affirmative sentence. Okay, what time the manager arrived. Now, let us see the second one. And this is very important. You have to pay attention and you have to remember this. The customer asked her who the manager was. Okay? You have to be very careful because we would have the tendency to change the position of was and put it here, but that sounds like a question. Who was the manager? Okay? And this is not a question. You are reporting a question that somebody had asked. Okay? So the customer asked her who the manager was because it was in the past tense. Okay? So here you have the order of an affirmative sentence, who the manager was. The mistake to place was here, who was the manager. The customer asked her, who was the manager? Nope, that is a mistake. You have to change the position of was and put it at the end. Okay. And here we have a table. And this is something that you have to study several times so you don't make mistakes. Verb changes in indirect speech. This chart is very important to you because here you have, he said, I report. He said, I'm reporting. He said, I reported. He said, I have reported. I had reported. I will report. I can report. I should report. And all of them suffer a verb change. If you have a present, you use past. He said, I report the news. He said that he reported the news. Okay? Remember, when we have indirect speech, we change the verb. If you have a present, you change it to past. What happens when you have the present progressive? He said, I am reporting the news. He said that he was, past tense, reporting the news. Okay? Here you have only one verb, report. And then you change it to the past tense. But here you have a present progressive, you have an auxiliary, am, and then the principal verb in the ing form. You change the auxiliary verb from am to was, okay? And the principal verb doesn't change. Okay, what happens when you have past tense? He said, I reported the news. You change it to the past perfect. He said that he had reported the news. And what happens when you have present perfect? I have reported. He had reported. And what happens when you already have the past perfect? Had reported the news. He said that he had reported the news. You see, here there is no change. You have had reported, and here you have had reported. But what happens when it is the future using will? You change from will to would. And if you use can report, you change it to could report. If you have a should report, then you use should report. As you can see, there are two cases in which you don't make a change in the verb when you're dealing with indirect speech. Past perfect, had reported, and should, you continue using should. Okay? So this chart is very important and you have to study it several times and do exercise so you internalize and you memorize the changes, and sometimes when you don't have to change. Now let us continue. Other changes in indirect speech, and these changes have to do with the pronouns, possessives, this, here, ago, now, today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Remember, this is advanced grammar, and many people make a lot of mistakes using reported speech with verb tenses and also with pronouns and what you have here. Let us begin with pronouns so you learn how to use them, how to change them so you don't make those mistakes, okay? Here we have direct speech. What do I mean when I say direct speech? It means the exact words. That is why you have a quotation and quotation, okay? But here we start the sentence with the direct speech. Andy, are you listening? Mary asked. If you see, after the direct speech, there is no comma. No, the comma was after the reporting verb, but since the reporting verb is at the end, then you just find a period to finish the sentence, okay? But let us concentrate on the direct speech. Andy, are you listening? Are you listening? Now let us see the indirect speech. Mary asked Andy if he was listening, okay? Because if you say, Mary asked Andy if you were listening, then the person would understand that Mary asked about you and not about Andy. So this he has to do with Andy. If it were the case of a woman or a girl, then the sentence would be, Mary asked Maritza if she was listening. So the pronoun here has to do with the noun that we have here, okay? Now, what happens when we have possessives? The boss said, comma, Sue, bring your camera. Sue, bring your camera. What do we do now that we have this? We have a possessive. Now let us see the indirect speech. The boss told Sue to bring her camera. Okay? It was her camera. You don't say your camera. This her has to do with Sue. Now, what happens when we have this? Can I have this film? Sam asked. That is direct speech. Can I have this film? And then in the indirect speech, you have Sam asked if he could have that film. You see? From you, you're talking about Andy. From you, you change to he because you're talking about Andy. In this case, you have your camera. And then you say her camera because you're talking about Sue. If you have this film, then you change it to that film when you use indirect speech. And what happens when you have a here? Will you be here? In the indirect speech, it changes to there. And then you have Mrs. Brown asked, will you be here? And then you have in indirect speech, Mrs. Brown asked if I would be there. Okay? Now, what happens with the word ago? We came a year ago, Jim said. Jim said that they had come a previously or a year before. Okay, so from ago, we use previously or before. We have now. Bob asked, are you leaving now? Bob asked if I was leaving then. Okay, so from now, we change to then. And what happens when we have today? Do we keep today? I need to work today, Jack said. Jack said that he needed to work that day. Okay, from today, we change to that day. What happens when we have a yesterday? The reporter asked, did you call yesterday? The reporter asked if I had called the previous day, or the reporter asked if I had called the day before. So from yesterday, we change to the previous day or to the day before. And what happens when we have tomorrow? Are you arriving tomorrow? Sarah asked. Sarah asked if we were arriving the next day. Okay? So what are some of the things that we have to remember? From you change to he if you're talking about a boy, or she if you're talking about a girl. From your, you change to her if you refer to a woman. From this, you change to that. From here, you change to there. From ago, you change to previously or before. From now, you change to then. If you have today, you change to that day. If you have yesterday, you use the previous day or the day before. If you have tomorrow, you have the next day. So you see, you have a lot of information in this chart, and it is important to study this several times until you internalize and, of course, do your exercises. We have come to the end of our lesson. That would be all for today. Bye.